All right, welcome to Change for the People, episode 6. We are so thrilled to be here today. We're thrilled we didn't get canceled. There's another episode. My name is Max Bach. I am the founder of Change for the People, former Kamala staffer, Democratic activist, and someone who's just passionate about all these issues. Change for the People is an organization dedicated to changing the way that we campaign. We don't want to just show up for elections and ask for votes. We want to listen to the people. We want to hear their stories and amplify their voices. We want to discuss the issues in their communities. We want to figure out the problems so we can come up with a solution. Our mission is to engage, inspire, and empower everyday people to become a part of the change. And our guest today, we're so thrilled to introduce. Let me go through this part really quick and then I'll introduce you. So, today we'll be speaking with a native Californian who has been active on many different levels of the state's political scene. We will discuss her journey into activism that started at the early age of 5. We will talk about her passion for making the world a better place. We will also discuss her career in corporate America and how it helped shape her viewpoint on the issues. Finally, we will discuss the California gubernatorial race and the 2028 election. And now, finally, our guest, Sarah Storelli. We're so excited to have you. Do you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Max, for having me today. It's truly a pleasure. Hi, everyone. Really appreciate you tuning in with us here today. I specifically have grown up in California, so I'm a lifelong California girl. I grew up in the Central Valley, specifically Fresno, Clovis area. My family was in agriculture specifically. And then I continued my journey after my childhood at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, which is along the central coast of California. And then after those 4 years, I have been based in San Francisco. So nearly for 15 years, actually, as of this summer. And so have been a lifer and been part of the state since the beginning of my time to really see those ebbs and flows from a political standpoint and how we need to continuously be advocating for and serving the people.
Terrific. Yeah, that's so interesting. And I'm so excited that we'll be able to hear about your journey and everything that's happened throughout the way and how you got to where you are today and everything. Okay. What originally got you interested in activism, social justice? Did something happen when you were a kid, like going to a protest?
Yeah, specifically, actually, when I was 5 years old, my mother was the PTA president of all things, with Parent Club locally at an elementary school. And so, specifically, there were various ballot measures that she was always advocating for as it related to education, since I am the baby of the family and have two older brothers. And so, she was hyper fixated on making sure that we had the best lives as possible as we could through policy. And so there were times when she would actually literally wagon me around our neighborhood. We still have a photo of like me in a red wagon, although we still need to find it. Back in the day of going door to door, knocking and advocating for those certain ballot measures. And so I really learned from such a young small age of the importance of grassroots advocacy and going door to door and being passionate about these issues, whether it was for your own children or others, just trying to make the world a better place. And subsequently, my mother also had served on various boards in the community for guilds and other organizations. And so, again, it was really always this embedded, purpose filled culture of just make the world or your community a better place however you can, whenever you can, with whatever you can. And so I used to sit with her in her guild board meetings, like when I was a child at like 5 years old, and even throughout elementary school. I would even go to lunch with all the ladies on the guild. Like it was just so much part of my culture. I feel like since I was a small child, just to be exposed to that. And I would say also just that state of authentic philanthropy, because I do think there's
Yeah.
also this other kind of angle where whatever knocks people's socks off, but there can be some of this more of performative philanthropy. And so I feel fortunate to have had the authentic exposure at a young age to really see just the true uh, state of heart from an advocacy perspective of actually making
Yeah.
change versus throwing money at a problem without really actually any backup, but truly going knocking door to door to go make a difference.
Wow. it's so cool how our past and our childhood and all of that stuff play such a big effect into how we became activists and our political viewpoints and us wanting to get out of here and do stuff now. And it's neat to hear how people's parents got them involved in all that stuff, because mine was the same way. But that's such a dynamic story. It's like, oh my gosh, like everybody should get their kids involved in. Yeah.
Right, like rally up the wagons and let's go. I mean, yeah, it really
Yeah.
makes you feel like compelled, like we can make change. And I think that's
Yeah.
why, really throughout my life and career, where I've always never accepted the word no or even
Yeah.
status quo. I reject that kind of mediocrity and type of mindset. And so I'm just used to not hearing the word no, and not in a unhealthy way. I would
Yeah.
say in the way of, no, we don't have to live like this. And why are we accepting certain things as a society? Like, we are the people, we have the voice, we can go to the ballot box, we can change and make
Yeah.
a difference, and not just be spoon fed what billionaires or other people tell us.
Yeah. Yeah. So I think that's a good kind of statement. If for us to give people and everything, is basically you can actually do something about it. I mean, you don't have to sit here and accept what's going on. There's so many ways to get involved, and we'll talk about that and everything. But yeah, that's a classic example. Okay. So can you tell us about getting elected as a student body president of Cal Poly, and how was that experience?
Yes, yeah. So throughout my, activism journey, I'm a graduate of Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, as I mentioned, and so I was actually the only student in student government my freshman year on our executive staff, since all the other
Right.
positions, they were, I was coming in, of course, right out of high school, which also held various leadership roles really throughout my time of elementary,
Yeah.
junior high, and high school. And then in college, I was, of course, compelled to continue advocating for the people. And so I had then shown up at our student government office, like during our week of welcome, AKA Cal Poly's infamous Wow Week, and then said, "Hi, I'm Sarah Storelli. I want to get involved." And so then I ended up being the only freshman in student government during that year of 2007 to 2008. And then I continued my journey there by actually serving on our university union advisory board for a few years, and then
Sure.
had served on, my goodness, a number of clubs, at least prior to me actually being, or outside of student government. I was involved in like 14 boards, clubs, committees, campus wide. So I was even like vice president of our undergrad law association. At the time when I was actually a registered Republican, I was our club outreach director for that as
Okay.
well. I would end up being president of our student philanthropy council. I was on our Cal Poly Foundation board as the only student. That was comprised of our board of various alumni and donors and supporters of the university who oversee the Cal Poly's specific endowment for our various initiatives, among a host of other areas. And so,
Mhm.
all that to say, by the time I got to I knew I wanted to be student body president like day one of college. And so I actually had told my dorm mates slash new friends at the time when we were freshmen during our Wow Week. We specifically were sitting in the stands seeing the current student body president speak at the athletic spirit rally. And I looked over and told my friends, like, that's going to be me in 3 years. And then sure enough, it was me in 3 years,
Oh,
which
wow.
was, yeah, which was really inspiring. One of those moments. And then actually one of my mentees, who also heard me give that speech, and he came into my office shortly after I gave that speech. He then actually became student body president 3 years later. So it was so cool just to see how that kind of influence and inspiration can truly propel people, and
Yeah.
also inspire them to make a difference and that they can obtain their dreams. So nonetheless, by the time I had gone through my first 3 years of college, I was already, involved in so many different activities across the campus, really, again, for the people and listening to issues and just deeply
Yeah.
integrated into what was going on. And so by the time I ran, I had actually had like endorsements from over 70 different clubs and groups on campus, and spoke to over that many, like during my
Oh,
active
wow.
campaigning time. And specifically, actually, one of the only people in like Cal Poly history to actually have official endorsements from the Cal Poly Democrats and Cal Poly Republicans, which was
Wow.
really amazing in that
Yeah.
sense, and a really cool experience for me. And even relating that back to my childhood, as my mom was a registered Democrat and my father was a Republican, given his farming and agriculture background, and so I actually grew up in a very middle of the road balanced household where
Yeah.
my parents always were discussing the best candidate, not who was the best party, and we just need to go vote for somebody because they were tailored to a certain party. And so I
Yeah.
feel like that approach really had always also resonated with me, but I also came to learn and find that on my own as well by someone who is very much of like pro business, pro human rights, pro
Yeah.
law and order in healthy ways, of course. And
Yeah.
so I think, from all of that kind of middle of the road mindset, that really had also, I would say, like propelled my campaign as student body president forward. And so it was an amazing experience to have, um, just especially, I guess, like at that age and scale, since I end up representing over like 20,000 students, not
Yeah.
only university wide, but locally in San Luis Obispo, as well as statewide, and then even, at federal level as necessary. And so to
Yeah.
truly be a voice for constituents at that scale, and essentially at 21 years old, and on
Yeah.
top of that, was also, running it was technically Associate Students Incorporated. It's a 501c3
Okay.
nonprofit organization. And so at that moment in time, we had a $12 million operating budget. And so there was also two other officers along with myself overseeing the organization. And so we had about 50 members in student government, like over,
Okay.
600 plus full-time staff members and, student workers as well.
Yeah.
And so all that to say, it was just this massive magnitude of truly getting to advocate for the people on imperative issues, not only just
Yeah.
impacting my current peers, but also future generations. And so I really was able to see how those building blocks from different administrations, if you will, since we essentially turn out every year,
Yeah.
uh, it was, I guess, a wonderful experience to have that at such a young age, to understand just
Yeah.
so much more of like the mechanisms behind it, where like a lot of people just think it's like, oh, student body president, rah rah rah, it's like,
Yeah.
no, I also was spearheading that and had a whole, we had a huge like go green campaign and various green and gold days on campus and spirit rallies,
Yeah.
all that fun stuff. But it was very much more as far as advocating at the local level. Like I would chair our student community liaison committee, comprised of our mayor, our city supervisor, our police chief, even Cuesta College, which was our city community college based there,
Okay.
among a host of others of 30 people. So, I mean, it was truly down in the weeds on issues. And then even on a monthly basis, I would go to meetings associated with the California State Student Association. So by default, as student body president, I was on that. And with the
Okay.
other 23 CSUs at the time, all of us in totality of the 23 universities, we would be advocating together on a monthly basis for statewide issues impacting the California State University system. So even from
Yeah.
having that kind of exposure at such a young age was truly critical. And I would say it was actually when, I was able to be in my happy place, if you will, of being able to really
Yeah.
be unleashed and thrive to continue advocating for folks.
Awesome. And there's so much in there, and most people don't know as student body president. Of course, Cal Poly. I mean, of course, it's a major university, so there's gonna be probably. I mean, how many students? 20,000? You think 30 or more? Or
Yeah, present day. Yeah, when I was there, we had about like 18,000, so then a few
yeah.
thousand grad students, and then now we have over 23,000 students.
So most people wouldn't even think that the student body president has that many functions, that you do so much, but you're able to get in there and make such a difference in all these young adults' lives, and in how to basically, kind of bring them into the mix, but also you're growing yourself as a young adult and as an activist and everything, and as a professional. But even a lot of that stuff, I mean, I had no idea, because when I was in college, I was never really involved. And so to be able to hear there's so much to that is so cool. So young people, if you're listening, get involved at your college, get involved anywhere you can, because at a young age, I think it's so important to be able to get all those skills and everything, because it's going to make you that much more ready for the real world later, but you're going to be that more well versed, I think, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And I feel like, especially just, as dealing with different personalities and
Yeah.
viewpoints, and, to understand how to go about that, and really the importance of collaboration and
Yeah.
listening. I feel like, just me being in that role had advanced my skills as a listener, because of course I am
Yeah.
someone, I'm like, oh, I love the spotlight and chatting. I can go tell you all the things all the time, every
Yeah.
day. But my platform was based off of the people, of my peers and constituents, of what they needed. And so listening was such a key component. And so I
Yeah.
do think it's imperative. And frankly, actually, even when I was in student government, since I was in it for all 4 years, it was actually a lot of folks and friends of mine who had joined, say, like their junior year or senior year when they ran for certain positions and got elected. Their one regret actually in college was that they didn't get involved sooner. And so I would say
Oh,
to
got it.
anybody listening that if you were thinking about it, and if you, even if you maybe feel burnt out from your high school political realm of activities, I would say
Yeah.
do it as soon as you can, because it's another elevated experience, and it is still
Yeah.
different from high school, of course, because you're now at the collegiate level. But regardless, it just gives you so much opportunity and exposure to so many different viewpoints. And so even like where I was sitting, I was hearing from students across every college and department across the university. So you're seeing
Yeah.
the needs of the engineers to the farmers to the historians.
Yeah.
So it really is a unique and fulfilling experience to be able to have that, and in ways where it still, I feel like, is a safe space, I'll
Yeah.
say. Now, granted, we are in different environments today.
Yeah.
So there are much different climates even than when I was in office from 2010 to
Sure.
2011. But nonetheless, I do want to encourage students and anybody listening to get involved as soon as you can. And even if you don't have to go be president if you don't want. There's just many other ways to get
Yeah.
involved from an advocacy perspective on serving on some of these different boards or committees, depending on how
Yeah.
people's student governments are structured.
So cool. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. So, can you tell us about serving on the San Francisco GOP Central Committee?
Yes, yes. So, of course, after college, I could not just, step away from my lifelong advocacy. And so, after I had moved up in SF and, got ingrained in my career, I then, of course, like, oh, I'm kind of, I feel like I wasn't getting that same knack, directly on a day to day basis that I had
Yeah.
been, for so long. And so, I had then at the time had, pinged some uh, Republicans who I had actually known during my college years and who are
Yeah.
based around in the Bay Area and other places in California. And so they first got me introduced to first the San Francisco Young Republicans, and then I got introduced to folks on the SFGOP Central Committee, which is
Okay.
essentially the gateway to go run for assembly. And
Yeah.
so I had uh, initially, a great experience, with those times. It was for a lot of those times where it's actually pre Trump administration era, just for folks
Yeah.
following along from a timeline perspective. And
Yeah.
so during that time, it was actually, I would say, quite, I would just say, beneficial, even inspiring in the way of how folks were really approaching issues in San Francisco as it related to policy, and really grounded, actually, interestingly enough, in human rights, as well as
Yeah.
still public safety, as well as being pro business, because sometimes in San Francisco there's been various issues, where it's not necessarily always a pro business community as well. And that's not to take away from the pro human rights. It's just saying, I think for those folks who do identify more as kind of middle of the road, at the end of the day, myself, I'm like, I want everybody to have a great bank account, and I want everybody to have their rights not infringed upon. And so
Yeah.
that's really the stance that I had taken. And so folks actually viewed me as quite a breath of fresh air and progressive young person involved on the Central Committee, since I was the youngest one
Yeah.
elected on the Central Committee. And so I essentially was this younger voice of reason, and really kind of was this like future of the party, if you will. Of course, until then, the Trump era started. And that's when I did step off of my time on the Central Committee, since my views no longer
Okay.
aligned with the Trump administration, specifically as it related to women's rights, as well as every single marginalized
Yeah.
community's rights in that sense. So up until
Yeah.
that time, though, I would say it was still pretty balanced. I mean, for perspective, interestingly enough, it was actually where we would always catch wind from the Democrat Central Committee here in SF, that sometimes folks would like literally be having fistfights in their meetings, like over certain
Yeah.
policies. and things. And in that sense, I'm like, nobody has time for that. I don't care what side of the road people are on.
Yeah.
Violence is never the answer. And so it also was just kind of went to show, okay, wow, like, some folks, were very extreme in their views, and frankly, nowadays on both sides, that is the case.
Yeah.
But back then it was interesting because it was like, oh, like the Republicans were actually looked at more as the people of reason. And so when I look back kind of over the past decade, like how much that has clearly changed, which is why I'm no
Yeah.
longer a part of the Republican Party. It is just very interesting to see that trajectory and really those different influential figures, if you will, even if they're bad,
Yeah.
of how that can impact the direction of one party or another.
Yeah. Okay. So you leave the Republican Party, and was there something specifically that happened? Because you were, I mean, technically, I guess, a lifelong Republican, always involved on that side. But what, I mean, you said the Trump era, started and everything. Was it specific things like you saw? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, yeah, and I would say so. Even since I was a registered Republican since I was 18. That said, I would vote across the aisle regardless.
Yeah.
So I guess a little bit similar to my parents' ethos, even though I also came to that own conclusion on my own.
Yeah.
After I left home in 2007. I would say actually for me, one of the major deal breakers, especially, was with abortion for women.
Yeah.
I just think as it related to women's health care and rights, nobody should be infringing upon a woman's body and telling her what she
Yeah.
can or can't do. And
Yeah.
as many debates I've had with folks, I will say, especially when I'm debating with men, I always love to tell them, like, well, your rights actually don't change from state to state, but mine do. And so
Yeah.
I've never seen Congress care so much about men's bodies. Don't know any laws that they've ever passed about that. So why is there such a fixation on women and
Yeah.
birth, if you will, in that sense, especially when Republicans do not actually care about the life cycle of a child these days, which I
Yeah.
feel like is evident in these mass school shootings. I mean, guns horrifically have more rights than women and even children. And some people may
Yeah.
think I'm extreme for saying that, but it's actually fact when you look at the end of the day. If somehow people's guns rights are more important and actually more effective, if you will, than
Yeah.
what a woman can or can't do with her body, and the government trying to
Yeah.
control that. And so I just thought having that kind of attack, in good conscience, not only just like for myself, for my peers, for all women
Yeah.
everywhere. Even I have a niece, and even thinking of her, of like, what does that look like for the next generation and others?
Yeah.
Like, how can we give them these rights that really restrict what they can or can't do? Like, nobody's
Yeah.
government should be telling them that kind of information, or implementing it as law. And so
Yeah.
that, I would say, was especially a deal breaker for me, of course, on top of all the pedophilial and sex trafficking as well.
Yeah. Well, and I think that, I mean, I'm sure it looked like from the data and everything, you saw millions of people turn away from the Republican Party after all these different things Trump has done, and how far the Republican Party has just shifted to the right, where they're so extreme on all these issues. They're just anti pretty much everything except for rich and powerful white men being in control of everything. And outside of that, I mean, they're pro rich people getting richer. They're pro let's have all this power, right? But they just want to stay up here while everyone else is down here. And I think you see more people on the right feeling alienated and everything. And I think you're seeing that now with the poll numbers they have right now, because they're polling at like some of their lowest numbers ever. And I mean, yeah, but like, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah. I'd also say, since I also, pro-military, in that
Yeah,
sense, and so, and not in the sense of, oh my gosh, let's go be, attacking everybody and pro-war. Or frankly,
yeah,
actually, I had, one of my, technically, is kind of like one of my first cousin once removed in the lineup on my father's side. He actually stormed Utah Beach in Normandy, and he
Yeah.
died 3 days later over
Okay.
in Normandy, and to directly fight fascism. And I've had numerous family members also who were Army Rangers and colonels and other folks serve in the military. And so I take that actually quite personally when I see the Republican Party today uh, fragrantly accepting fascism and displaying it and not having any
Yeah.
issues with that, and also disgracing our veterans. I have a major issue with that. I mean, these folks give their
Yeah.
entire lives for this country. Sometimes, I mean, they either die for this country, or if they are still living, they have incurred increasingly amounts of PTSD from war. And I
Yeah.
feel like war is the absolute worst of humanity. And for the Republican Party today to just be gallivanting around as if war is some fun sport and let's go do that, and not actually have any systems in place to go appropriately support veterans once they get home. Now, of course, yes, there's the VA. So, folks listening, don't think I'm some extremist that doesn't think there's anything available for veterans. I know there are resources available, but they're also getting heavily cut by the Trump administration, and that is
Okay.
devastating. And so I think, again, the Republican Party in so many ways, I mean, they used to be actually pro human rights, which is why I was
Yeah.
part of it, where they actually used to be pro free speech. And I have many friends who are BIPOC. And so, even for that whole community of African Americans, especially that I know, who have just been beyond persecuted, and frankly, every single race really has, or a variety of my friends in the LGBTQIA plus community.
Yeah.
Like, as an ally, I am constantly advocating and really being a safe space for those folks. Like, I'm just so tired of the government and Trump and his team, especially, like, infringing on people's rights, thinking and saying, like, and defining who people can or can't love, what they can or can't do
Yeah.
with their bodies, who gets resources, who doesn't. It's
Yeah.
just, I've had enough.
Yeah. Yeah. That's what it sounds like. I mean, yeah. I mean, the Republican Party today is, if you look at like the party of Reagan, it's just night and day difference. And I think probably the older generation sees that a lot more than me and you, but like the
Yeah.
boomer generation and everything. But yeah, I mean, and I think, how do we counter a lot of that, and how is our Democratic Party? I think we always have an image problem a little bit, because we have so many on the, you can be far left and we're not progressive enough, right? But then if we're too progressive, then a lot of the centrists and a lot of those former, Republicans won't vote for us, because they're going to be like, okay, they're too far left. So, it's just kind of like, how do we fix that? How do we counter that and everything? But yeah, but that all makes tons of sense. So thank you. So, okay, so let's get into your career in corporate America, which I find very interesting in how it kind of shapes your worldview on politics and everything. So, can you tell us about your role at IBM and work on relaunching the Smarter Cities and Safer Planet business units?
Yes, absolutely. So, yeah, I've always had my career based in San Francisco, but held global roles. So I've always been
Okay.
gallivanting around the world for corporate. And so, specifically in 2015, I was hired by IBM to come in and relaunch their Smarter Cities and Safer Planet business units around the world at global scale from a public relations perspective, since
Mhm.
the business was, reigniting these, since they had prior to that, and then, had sunset them a little bit or evolved them. That was prior to my time, because I was, still in college. So nonetheless, but I did graduate in 2011, but still kind of during those whole times, it had evolved a lot. And so when I got there in 2015, was then hired to go relaunch those, and that was actually quite an eye-opening experience, because, again, when somebody would think, oh my gosh, at corporate, like, how is that? But you really, when you start digging in to those issues, it was essentially like, how could IBM technology help make our world safer or more
Okay.
efficient, streamlining like city problems, even from like city lighting for like public safety,
Okay.
to just making cities overall more intelligent about even like working with like water-based organizations, like, is there clean
Yeah.
water in these cities, like you just started really seeing all these other topics and how much overlap and intersection there actually was between like technology in the private sector and the good it actually could do, even from like an analytics standpoint to um, diving deeper into, truly helping save lives from like a public safety standpoint.
Okay.
So we also, had components where we were, working with, police organizations as well, not
Hmm.
in creepy, crazy ways. It was, more so of truly from a public safety standpoint. And so I would say that really had initially, opened my eyes like, oh, wow, like corporations do care. And I think like the asterisk, of course, is like, well, as most people would assume, I mean, corporations, they're capitalists. So of course they care about money. At the same time, I feel like where I was
Yeah.
really able to come in and find that sweet spot, which I feel like also, has shaped well, I guess, probably to also kind of how I identify politically as far as being like, we can have both. That's like pro human rights and pro
Yeah.
bank accounts, for the people of like,
Yeah.
again, like, let's make sure people have access to clean water and education and lighting, on their
Yeah.
streets. In addition to leveraging technology in those certain ways to make it better. And so, especially from, I would say, the broader corporate angle, it wasn't necessarily like getting technology into like every certain citizens hand in that sense. It was
Yeah.
more of, working with these different, agencies and organizations, statewide or even in different countries, around the world to help improve their overall well-being and even
Yeah.
efficiency and processes, even as it does relate to like voter registration, or other components based on what those different regions around the world needed.
Interesting. Yeah. And that's, you always kind of see that stuff on the news and everything, but I've, most people don't know somebody who's actually worked on a lot of those, big global initiatives and everything. So it's so cool to see how that directly affects society, in different regions of the world and everything, but actually how it improves people's lives and, working on stuff like that, like you talk about clean air and everything and like lighting for roads and everything. It's just, yeah, it's really neat to see that and how you're actually doing social good doing that work. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So
Yes,
that's
yeah, yeah. That's what I'm
cool.
talking about. Like there is so much benefit that I feel like so many times, yeah, the public doesn't see. But I'm like, oh my gosh,
Yeah,
like there really is such this crossover where both sides, if you will, can win and actually do need to be working together for the
yes,
people
yeah,
to advance all of our lives in a
absolutely.
great beneficial way.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Okay, let's talk about your roles at Call for Code during your time at IBM. What is the organization and what kind of work did you do?
Yes, yeah. So while I was at IBM, we had teamed up with a few different organizations like David Clark Cause, as well as UN Human Rights,
Oh,
and a
wow.
myriad of others, even like the Clinton Foundation, American Red Cross, the Consumer Technology Association Foundation, and a host
Okay.
of others that we had, even like AT&T and AT&T FirstNet Authority, a host of folks, where we were actually enabled 26 million developers around the world and
Mhm.
the everyday person, if you will, to essentially go help make the world a better place and solve pressing global challenges underpinned with IBM technology. So,
Okay.
what does that mean? So, we actually had, so my first year, I led all of our global communications for it. And then in its second year, I then was promoted to go lead all of our key strategic global partnerships for that. And then
Mhm.
in its third year, I got promoted to go be the first chief marketing officer of it. So by the time I was done with it, we had reached over 180 nations with over 400,000 participants. So we truly
Wow.
were. It was really this, unique advocacy component. So I had even owned one of our relationships we had with the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Agency as well. And so all that to say, what we would be doing is it was essentially every year there was a new competition where
Yeah.
we would go outreach to these developers around the world and anybody else interested to go actually like build technology kind of with our certain guidelines. And then the
Yeah.
winner of it would win a significant cash prize and then also have their technology deployed by IBM. So it was actually from our first year's winner that we had in 2018. In 2019, I was part of the team of IBMers where we went down actually to Puerto Rico and were there for 2 weeks with the winner out in the field, like literally in the weeds of Puerto Rico across many different portions of the islands, to test their technology to go essentially be another communication network, a
Mhm.
mesh network that would work, say, like in times of disaster. So people could still actually communicate, like the everyday person, like say if communication went down, like you and I could still be able to text and communicate and like get to safety or know where each other were, like help
Yeah.
with resources. And so we had our initiative was focused on a variety of items from disasters to climate change. We've even launched another area on like social racial justice. So we were
Oh,
tackling these issues at mass scale. And
yeah.
as I do like to tell folks, and as I will here too, I actually feel like it was truly that time working on Call for Code while I was at IBM that just immensely opened up my eyes to the inequities that exist around the world, as far as
Mhm.
even with folks who women having to walk miles upon miles to get access to clean water, and then have to walk with a whether it's a bucket or a clay pot, whatever they had, back on their head or on their shoulders
Yeah.
of 50 miles, just to have one little pot of water. I mean, it was just, and then you then start digging into being like, wow, okay, well then that actually then impacts access to education. So people don't
Yeah.
have clean water in their area, if they have to go fetch it, which can take days to go
Yeah.
there and to come back. All right, well, okay, women can't then be in a classroom during the day, or these young girls can't be there during the day. And so
Yeah.
we really just started to see even more, to your point, I feel like we hear, and especially in America sometimes, and I would say, of course, for those of us, if we did have a background of privilege, you
Yeah.
see, oh, okay, some things on the news and it tugs at your heartstrings, but you don't actually, it almost just seems like an arm's distance away. And
Yeah.
yet I feel like when I was really, and I was able to have those different moments, I would say, I guess, throughout my tenure of advocacy as a child, throughout,
Yeah.
in my time at Cal Poly and even in SF. But really, I would say, like at IBM, from that more global scale of issues around the world impacting people, it
Yeah.
was, again, it was kind of another perfect example of like marrying public sector needs with private sector capabilities to really be
Yeah.
that bridge. And so I feel like I've been able to be that bridge so much throughout my career, and especially from those last 10 years, well, now I guess 11 when I started at IBM, to really breathe that type of bridge between public and private sector, because both actually
Yeah.
do need each other in these ways where it's what's good for business is what's good for society. What's good for society is what's good for business. And so I
Yeah.
think if anything, it's actually just getting more people exposed to that, to actually see it. Because I think a lot of times, of course, we just see, oh, there's X billionaire touting around, and they're so far removed from reality where they don't even care about some of these issues. But I would say the
Yeah.
folks who are truly in the day-to-day work on and working on some of these issues, like it's incredibly real and
Yeah.
tangible and impactful to say, like, this is really the ways that we should be addressing society, which then of course rolls over into
Yeah.
politics.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's such an incredible story about how all your work in corporate America and doing that kind of reshape your, or, help shape your views on society, on politics, on all of these things, and how much, you talk about privilege and everything, but you see all of this stuff and you see all this poverty, and it really does affect you to where you're like, oh my gosh, like I want to do something about it. I want to help these people.
Yes.
And
Right. And that's why, my
yeah,
goodness, these people in power, like we can do so much good, like they can actually be doing something. And so I guess
yeah,
what's really frustrated me is that so many people choose not to,
yeah.
when there's absolutely answers, there's absolutely solutions, and we absolutely can be making a difference regardless of what politicians or billionaires like to tell people.
Yeah, and I think too it's so much, it goes to the how much it matters who's president and everything, because the Trump administration has cut just hundreds of millions of dollars, even probably billions, for funds for all these organizations across the world that are, feeding all these people, but providing hospitals, providing schools, education, and everything. You're talking about Africa and some of the poorest parts of the world, South American and all these places, to basically take that money and give it to tax breaks for the rich, give it to Doge and Elon Musk, and basically for what, the ballroom. So he's saying we'd rather have money for the ballroom, but then we can't afford to feed all these people and everything. Because you can look at if you go back to the administrations, the Biden Harris administration, Obama, Clinton, they all invested money into the stuff you're talking about. and there's a lot of NGOs and everything else. But I mean, it's just, yeah, you see the difference, and it's night and day difference. And it's like, okay, like you said, we can do something about it. We don't have to sit here and watch all this happen. I mean, we have the power to actually, make change like you're talking about.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think instead of, I mean, even for instance, with what's going on, in the Middle East of, just starting wars that aren't even, approved by Congress. And so to
Yeah,
be having so much money always on destruction and really
yeah,
destroying people's lives at every turn,
yeah,
rather than actually helping people, or my goodness, in America, how we pay for education, for
yeah,
healthcare, for so many critical services that people
yes,
need, and yet, and food, and
yeah,
housing, and yet, oh well, okay, yeah, let's go throw a ballroom so Trump can go have another bunker for when
yeah,
essentially the world explodes here. I mean, it's asinine, frankly, and
yeah,
I think that's why you're also starting to see a lot of folks finally wake up a little bit more, I think, in the party,
yeah.
because now they're actually being directly impacted. I mean,
Impacted. Yeah,
and I mean, Trump always says how much he loves the uneducated. I mean, you see those people, just cheering him on, not even realize like he's stealing from them
getting
wide
affected
open,
by
not
it.
even just
Yes.
behind closed doors.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
yet, like,
Yeah, they're the ones right now who are going to lose their health care. I mean, they're the
and they're
ones who
still
are going to,
cheering him on, like, yes, yes. It's like, no, like, do you realize like how destructive that
yeah,
is, to be destroying uh, the American dream, American
yeah,
ideals, our principles, our Constitution? Frankly, I've had it with the Republican Party of having zero backbone with any of these
yeah.
things of destroying the Constitution. They've ripped it up, thrown it out the window, and yet they used to pride themselves on being the party of law and order. And that's no longer the case. I'm like, and don't even get me started on
No.
the Epstein files. I'm like, oh my gosh, with that insane amount of just abuse and sex trafficking, and
Yes.
how much they are continuing to act like the victims versus
That
actually
could be a whole
serving
episode where we're
justice.
talking about that. Yes. Oh, it's horrible. Yeah, because I worked in the district attorney's office in my 20s, and to move Ghislaine Maxwell to a minimum security prison, she's a convicted sex trafficker, and she got sentenced to 20 years. And for them to do that, I mean, not to get off topic too much and everything, it's one of the most disgraceful things I've ever seen, and it's just pure 100% trying to protect Trump at the expense of all those victims and everything. I mean, and
Yes.
it's just a complete misuse of the Justice Department, and just a complete betrayal of all those voters who said, "Oh, I'm going to release the Epstein files on day one." Blah 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 blah. Then he gets in office and he does the opposite. He just covers it up and everything. But I mean, kind of what we needed to be able to do is take all that rage and all that 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 frustration and everything, and get out there and tell this stuff to people all around the country, and get engage all these people and inspire them and empower them, because we can be mad about it and everything, but we have to do something about it, which we're doing on this podcast, and so that's
Woohoo.
good. Yeah, yeah, so, yeah,
Yes, yes, and we're for the victims, and I think again, it's like, why are women always getting the short end of the stick? It's like, just to
yeah,
be a voice for them. My God, when you see that image of Pam Bondi, just sitting there, and you see like so many of the victims standing behind her, and she never once acknowledged them or looked back.
oh
I mean,
no,
that is just beyond. And people
yeah,
wonder why women don't come forward, when they
yeah,
are raped, and need help, or need to go to therapy to heal, or to have their perpetrator behind bars.
yeah,
It's beyond me of the state we're living in, with a lack of a justice system that actually works. And I think that's starting to wake
yeah,
some other people up as well. It's of course clearly a two-tier justice system, but it's also one that's literally not even being operated in or working right now. And so when we have
yeah,
violent criminals like Trump on the streets and in these positions of power, that
yeah,
is a destructive and massive disservice to the people, and frankly for the state of America to continue in whatever way it can
yeah,
possibly, and recover, especially now that we're in our 250th year. And as we all know, for those of us who opened a history book, or sat in a history class at any given time, is that at the end of the day, every empire always falls. And so it is deeply alarming to me, but I'm also passionate about helping save America however we all can collectively from these destructive
Yeah.
people who are trying to destroy democracy and institute authoritarianism and fascism for exactly what my
Absolutely.
ancestors directly fought for and died for all
Yeah.
of us.
Well, and I mean, I think people all across the country empathize with that and feel that, and people are feeling the pain in some, at their pocketbooks right now, but also like we talked about, I mean, losing all these services and everything. So yeah, it's good that we're talking about it because people are going to be able to hear this and they're going to be able to join us and everything, and we're going to be able to go out here and say, okay, hey, we need your help. We need you to get out here and do the work with us and everything, because it is going to be difficult to win back the White House, because it was very difficult in 2020 and we barely won. We squeaked it out. And so we've got to be able to do all that again, but it's going to be even harder. So, but we'll get more into that because we don't want to get it, too off topic. So, okay. So let's hear about your work with Amazon Web Services. What are some of the things you accomplished during your time with the organization?
Yeah, so specifically as it continued really on in my ethos of public-private sector, I was actually on a worldwide public sector marketing team for my entire duration that I've been there. So that was for over 4 years. And
Okay.
so I had led like all of our global marketing for our cloud innovation centers and programs, our public sector startups, a host of other items. And even as it related to like our cloud innovation centers, we actually had at the time when I used to oversee this, so this was back in like 2021, we
Okay.
specifically had like over 13 of these centers actually at universities around the world. And so it was directly where we then had a few AWS employees specifically based on those campuses and in those centers. So we would actually work directly with the students and we would accept pitches, if you will, whether it was from nonprofits, state and local governments on certain issues they had where they
Okay.
needed some work done pro bono to go help solve X pressing issue in their community. And so or for their organization. So for instance, even from like, helping reduce opioid deaths, like actually for Cal Poly
Yeah.
San Luis Obispo, we did a whole case study on that. And we actually had some technology developed to help, prevent actual deaths from opioids. I
Hmm.
mean, it was just really fascinating items here from the healthcare to climate change again to,
Yeah.
public safety, kind of all those same issues that I had worked on at IBM, we were doing that at AWS. And so then essentially, after those organizations would, pitch like our innovation centers, they would then align on if they would accept the proposal. And then the end result was actually the students at those universities would build the technology with the AWS experts who were there
Mhm.
on site and then actually give back, whether it was the local government or the nonprofit, they would give them back a prototype of the technology to deploy. And at that point, that certain, third party, they would either go and deploy the technology and or then, work on having a strategic partnership with AWS and that capacity to come in and help them manage it, deploy it. So again, it was very inspiring work to be doing that around the world in 13 different locations across geographies. And
Yeah.
then, of course, as it relates to our public sector startups, a lot of similar things with that, specifically focused even like on education, tech startups, as well as government tech startups. And then I'd also overseen all of our executive wide storytelling for
Yeah.
public sector. And so I had a vodcast, actually AWS Behind the Cloud, that got
Oh, cool.
122 million views externally from over 11 episodes featuring our
Wow.
most senior level executives in worldwide public sector at AWS. So it was these really cool features about the people behind the tech. So I was never
Yeah.
actually selling
So
AWS
interesting.
technology. It was all about like, hey, here's these pioneers. Here's how they're helping change the world. Here's what they're thinking about. Here's what drives them. Who's inspired them. So they
Yeah.
would just have fascinating stories about how some of them didn't even have any mentors ever, but yet they, became, vice presidents within Amazon Web Services. And so you just
Yeah.
see again really these different pathways that people would take on
Yeah.
it. And then additionally, I had then overseen a variety of our federal wide storytelling and marketing components, and then
Cool.
also like our global campaigns for our federal business. And then
Yeah.
as well as for marketing for some of our strategic defense partners as well. So I was really across the whole gamut, if you will, and then even also had touched upon some of our executive wide hospitality efforts for our public sector organization customers. So all that to say it was very much embedded in public sector issues from the private sector side, and really finding those different touch points of how we could be working with these organizations to go solve, again, these really pressing global challenges, as it related to federal issues, to education
Yeah.
issues, nonprofit issues. And so to be able to
Interesting.
have that kind of magnitude of experience, again, really had just continued to solidify my, I would say, just my continued advocacy, and really,
Yeah.
being able to use my platform for good and help make more movement in this space for the people.
Yeah. That's so cool, and it shows you there's so many ways where you can impact society. Like I said earlier, I mean, who would know that you could get in there and work for Amazon Web Services and IBM and have such a big impact on like social good, social justice, social advocacy, activism, in effect, the political landscape in that regard. So, yeah, super interesting. Okay, so we're gonna get into the California gubernatorial race, and I have a little segment.
Now
Here we
to
go.
decision 2026 in California's primary election. The last day to vote just 1 week away. On the ballot, the very crowded field in the race for governor.
Our Conan Nolan live in the newsroom right now with how things are shaping up in these final days. Conan.
Hey, Colleen, well, voters have a week to cast a ballot, but it is believed that so many see this race for governor as fluid that they have decided to wait, and now the clock is ticking. Today, unionized firefighters, along with SEIU and Planned Parenthood, rallying in the Bay Area for a leading Democrat in the race for governor. That is former California Attorney General Javier Becerra, whose campaign appeared to benefit the most when former Congressman Eric Swalwell dropped out of the race. This is Becerra's chief rival, Tom Steyer. He was voting, dropping his ballot outside San Francisco City Hall. Steyer, a billionaire, will be spending upwards of $200 million in this campaign. That's a record. In total, there are 8 remaining high-profile candidates. Remember, the top 2, regardless of party, face off in November.
Alrighty. Okay, so let's get into the California gubernatorial race, given California's June 2nd primary election day. So let's discuss your work on the upcoming race. What are some things you did to help get out the vote in California for the gubernatorial race?
Absolutely. Well, one of my, as you can see here, I did vote, here with my sticker, which is very exciting. So I actually had taken more of the grassroots social media route, just kind of
Okay.
given my platforms and reach. And so really across all my platforms, from Instagram to Facebook, even LinkedIn. I know a lot of times people, they're kind of a little more hesitant to be posting on LinkedIn these days with their employers, but I work for myself these days, since I have my own go-to-market advisory firm. And so it's nice to be able to have that freedom, if you will, and work with who I want.
Yeah.
That being said, I feel like, especially on LinkedIn, in front of that type of business audience, I feel like every day, actually, I'm getting private direct messages from people of telling me how much they welcome and appreciate my posts, and they're so grateful to me for speaking up, because sometimes they might not be able to because of their employer directly, but they of course would,
Yeah.
just in verbally speaking with somebody, not online. And so I feel like it's resonating, it's working. So I'm like, all right, I've had so many people say, keep posting, keep speaking up. So I'm like, yes, I'm doing that. And I've also found threads actually be quite effective. It's actually, I even know how we got connected.
Yes.
And so I feel like with the organic reach on threads, I mean, my goodness, I had a post actually go out, especially as it related to Thomas Massey, when he actually had lost his primary. And I say that in the context of that, my post specifically actually for that reached over 7.4 thousand views within only a few hours of just organic reach. No boosting, no paid sponsored content. Just truly organic reach to the people getting involved in the topics. And so I have continued to, if you will, tag the topics like Becerra for governor, especially on threads, to really be able to give him a boost, and even tag his profile,
Yeah.
be advocating for folks, and encouraging them to advocate for Becerra for governor, really through their social media channels, because I understand so many people have a million different priorities in their lives. And so
Yeah.
social media can literally take like a minute or two to just quickly push something out, of your
Yes.
support, or even share it as an Instagram story. Like there's so many ways to do that. And so of course I'm like, yay for everybody who is down in the weeds of like, with phone calls to door knocking, all of that is of course immensely and just as important. I would say though, just given my schedule, I've
Yeah.
been traveling a lot for my clients lately, going for like 7 weeks straight. And so I like, well, I was able to be most effective by my online advocacy for him.
Yes. All right. Well, that's good. Yeah, and it is. I think it's one of the new ages of campaigning is that you can reach so many people so quickly, and how big of an impact that it has on people, especially young people who a lot of the times they get most of their their news and their information from social media. So they're not going to be somebody who might, excuse me, Google it or look at a newspaper or something or do research, but they may just see it on Facebook or LinkedIn or Threads and be like, oh, okay, I didn't know that. I didn't know that about that Republican candidate or that Democratic candidate, or I didn't even know that there was an election today. Let me get out and vote. So I think, yes. Yeah.
Yeah, and actually, and even to that point, I actually had someone this morning who had pinged me early because they were going to vote, and it was like 6:45 in the morning, so actually I wasn't awake just yet. But I saw it as soon as I woke up, and they had like direct messaged me on Instagram actually saying, Sarah, like, who do I vote for governor? Like, I need to know for like this certain primary, and then I got like before because I wasn't awake yet, and then it was like 2 minutes later, I then got like another message from that person saying, hey, actually, I checked your Facebook and like scrolled through and saw who to vote for. So I voted for Becerra. And I was like, yes. So I'm like, so it really does work. I feel like if people knowing, who these trusted voices of reason are and common sense based, and that they know that, I'm not, as well as many others, aren't going to give a skewed perspective, in that sense. It's a very fair, balanced approach. And so I thought that was awesome to actually wake up to this morning, like, oh, like it is working, again, like how much people do check social media, to your point, and regardless of folks' ages, and I think specifically, he's even a Gen Xer. And so I think, regardless of generation these days, of how much social media has changed that campaign landscape, to your point, it can reach the masses in such a short amount of time versus I can't go knock on 7,000 doors in 2 hours, but I can go reach 7,000 people by one post, on social media. That took me less than 5 minutes to write and then upload to, publish. So I think, social media is definitely changing that landscape, and people and even, candidates, especially we do get up here in the midterms and for the presidential election, really should not underestimate the value and reach of social media.
Well, and two, I think with so much disinformation out there and propaganda, and you're going to see so much actually fake news out there that's pushed by the far right and all these groups and all these billionaire corporations and all these offshore companies and in all these places. They're trying to basically stop people from getting to vote. So they're going to try to suppress the vote by putting all this out there. And if you don't have someone to put out all the real facts and information, people can just go on there and see it. And see like, okay, oh, well, this candidate, did they actually say that? Did they actually do that? I don't know. But then they see your post and they see you're someone reliable and trustworthy in your background and everything. Like, okay, well, Sarah's legit. I believe her. So good job. Yes, very good job.
Thank you.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. As a California native, lifelong resident, why is it so important that California elects a Democrat as governor?
Oh my goodness. I would say, well, definitely to protect our human rights. I think, especially, during this time in which we're at as a country, I think we need somebody who will fight back against the Trump administration. As a lifelong Californian, we do believe in the American dream. I mean, heck, we think, and it sounds a little arrogant, but we are the American dream, in that sense. And of course, other people are as well across the U.S. But from a California perspective, it really has always been that, or especially when I've known people who've come into the state, it's always like California. It's like, this, kind of like the wild, wild west, where we're just this uncharted territory. Like you can be whoever you want and do whatever you want and make something of yourself. And so I think really for us to We need to continue to prioritize that entrepreneurial spirit. In order to do that, we have to also be fighting back against a government that is trying to hinder us on a federal level from that. And so I think
Yeah.
by being able to elect a governor where we can still keep our rights, like where my rights for healthcare,
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about a
Yeah.
woman's body, I mean, our rights change as soon as we leave the state,
Yeah.
going to other states around the US. And so I think for California to really continue to lead the way from a progressive
Yeah.
standpoint of ideologies and really for all marginalized populations, I think
Yeah.
that is absolutely imperative. And to find ways to work with, unions and advocating for the people and really finding more of these
Yeah.
ways to work collaboratively between public private sector, especially, I
Yeah.
mean, my goodness, I'm here in San Francisco and with Silicon Valley, the heart of innovation and technology. It's like, my goodness, we need to be actually working together to go solve some of those pressing global challenges, as well as statewide challenges and even nationwide. And so I
Yeah.
think in order, we need an advocate in that role as
Yeah.
governor to continue to advocate for us and to protect us for our
Yeah.
human rights and our civil liberties, and to continue to advocate for us to maintain the American dream.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good answer. Okay. Um, can you tell us about the scholarship you started in your mother's name?
Yes, yes. So, of course, since she was such an inspiration, and she is alive and well, I should say that as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes, a lot of people do that in memoriam, but no, it's actually to
Yeah.
honor her while she's alive, which has actually been incredibly rewarding for her as well to experience. Is actually, I started a scholarship, the Kathy Storelli Use Your Voice scholarship for Cal Poly student government members
Okay.
who use their voice for good, since that program and that organization, obviously during my time in college, was the most influential on me and made that impact, especially where I was really to be able to shine and grow as a person, as a leader,
Yeah.
an advocate. I wanted to continue to give back resources to students who have a financial need for it, so that way they continue to stay involved in their advocacy work while also going to school, and they don't have to be worried about paying for whether it's food or books or whatever else they
Yeah.
need to be doing. And so it's great. So far there's been two recipients since I started a few years ago. So now we're actually coming up on our third here, which is exciting because, my mom and I, we've been able to get to know these students and have a relationship with them and see
Yeah.
them grow and the impact that they're making and doing. And so it's such this, a really special tribute, I would say, for me to give to my mom, to honor that legacy of encouraging me to always use my voice and platform for good and for the
Yeah.
marginalized and for the voiceless. And so I have
Yeah.
found it to be rewarding to give back in that way to Cal Poly student government of that next generation of leaders, and to continue to do that, so that way that they can continue to really find themselves and advocate for more people in the
Yeah.
process.
How cool too, and it's such a neat story when you hear how you started, how your mother got you involved in activism and everything. You go to Cal Poly, you become student body president, and then you start a scholarship in her name, in that is able to help the next generation and all these people. That's such a cool, just kind of like the ethos of that and everything. But it's very inspiring for me, and just I think for anybody to hear that story and be like, oh my gosh, that's so cool that she did that. She accomplished all these things and she started a scholarship. So now it's there at Cal Poly to help other students. So yeah, very, 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 very impressive. So okay, let's shift to 2028 a little bit. What are your thoughts, coming in? I know we get the midterms and everything, but then right after that, it's going to be fast and furious. 2027 primaries, then 2028 presidential election. What should Democrats be doing? Like, what should we be focusing on to win back the White House?
Yeah, so I would say, at the end of the day, because there's, if we try to tackle all the problems, we then, try to serve every single person in that sense, we actually won't win. And I say that in the capacity
Yeah.
of, a lot of times I'll be hearing in, Democrats campaigns like, hey, there's space for you in our campaign too. Well, okay, that's nice. Like, what does that even mean?
Yeah.
Especially if so many folks are differentiated on policies. The asterisk there is that, again, I think it's actually finding a lot of the centrists, because as I've had conversations with folks, um, people actually, and even like myself included, I think at times actually both parties are doing a disservice to America, because both have actually gotten incredibly polarized and extreme. Now, the thing where Democrats, I think, can come in and step in is, instead of just saying, hey, there's space for you, is actually
Yeah.
like show that in a way of being, centrist with this middle of the ground versus, sometimes with folks, okay, hey, maybe they've voted kind of both ways throughout their political, voting tenure, if you will. So it's not necessarily to be like, despising people, thinking they're all the devil, okay, if they voted for a certain Republican at one point,
Yeah.
but rather like, hey, like, let's focus on the issues that affect people. Like, what
Yeah.
actually are those?
Yeah.
Like, let's focus on healthcare,
Yeah.
even like human rights, taxes. I mean, people right now are suffocating, whether it's even the gas pump, to food increases in prices, to housing issues and inequities. And so
Yeah.
I think if the Democrats can stay more aligned to like those issues that are truly impacting the people, versus
Yeah.
I think it's true on both sides, where people will just start, throwing out all the buzzwords and this and
Yeah.
that. And I think we have to really be focused on, okay, what issues are actually going to go help us win. And of course, me actually being an empath and also, a pro human rights here, they
Yeah.
have to also be thinking about the business component of like, okay, if we truly think about the American dream holistically, that also
Yeah.
does include bank accounts. It's not just pro human rights. Of course, we need to be defending freedoms and our democracy every day and our human rights. So
Yeah.
that way people can continue to love who they love without being persecuted. It's the point of also taking into account, all right, like, what's good for society and what is good for business. Like, and I actually think Kamala had some really great,
Yeah.
policies from her run as it related to housing, whereas Trump is essentially, destroying people not being able to buy a house. She was willing to go give people deposits with that. And so I
Yeah.
think, again, to really showcase to folks where we also should not be fixated on trying to convince MAGA to come join the
Yeah.
party. I actually think that's a lost cause and a waste of time if we're going to get down to
Okay.
strategy. Like, I would not actually concern myself that much with them. I would actually
Yeah.
focus more on the centrists and people who
Yeah.
may still be registered as Republicans, but they've only just stayed that way because they didn't feel like, changing over for whatever reason, even if they don't support Trump.
Yeah.
Because I do know some folks like that as well. So I'm like, it's finding those folks in that middle ground who
Yeah.
typically will sway elections
Yeah.
without being so extreme. And in order to do that, there has to be the business component of, great, how
Yeah.
are we helping them have small businesses? I'm not talking corporate tax breaks. I'm talking about, like, for the everyday person, like, how are we making things better for them with their bank
Yeah.
accounts, in such ways? And so that is where I think Democrats should be focusing on, of like housing, food, gasoline prices, as well
Yeah.
as what people at healthcare prices, people in education,
Yeah.
access to education, access to healthcare. Those are things that every single person needs without getting lost in the culture war conversations, if you will. So I think that's where we actually need to just elevate some of that
Yeah.
rhetoric, even in the sense of like, we know those bozos are already going to go say stupid stuff. Like, they were already trying
Yeah.
to, call James Tellerico, trans. And it's like, I'm for the trans folks. And honestly, I don't know why the Republican Party is so fixated on trans people. Like, what the
Yeah.
hell? I mean, it's
Because it's a way to
ridiculous.
scare people. They're trying to, put fear in people and scare them and saying all these trans people are going to do all this stuff and everything.
Yeah.
Just like with Hispanics and the border and
Yes.
everything, they're trying to create all that fear. So that if you're scared, then you're going to be like, okay, I don't want to vote for those people because they're going to let all this happen, right? And people are so afraid of that factor. So that's what that's why I think they
Yeah.
do it.
Yeah, and actually, and one more point to add on to that too, as it does relate to like the business angle. I mean, actually, I have known many I guess acquaintances or people through others in corporate who are, either getting laid off because they were immigrants, their visas are expiring. I mean, there's major turmoil going on in corporate
Yeah.
America that they always are just aren't saying because they're in fear of the Trump administration right now. But all of Trump's policies are a disgrace and deeply hurting the workforce as well. And
Yeah.
so I think if Democrats can also stick to that point of how these failed immigration policies from Donald Trump are impacting the workforce for the everyday
Yeah.
American, that also I think would be a massive win for the Democrats to stick to.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you make a good point at the beginning when, you can't alienate people and you can't sit here and say, oh, well, we don't want that person or we don't want to try to reach that person because they used to be a Trump voter or they used to be a Republican, or we're going to demonize them, or we're going to sit here and say, kind of just have that type of, well, you're either with everything or you're not with us, right? Yeah. And we can't do that because I think that's a losing strategy, because we can agree on all of these different issues. We don't have to agree on everything. Like me and you, we probably disagree on some stuff, but I'm not going to say, well, Sarah, you're not welcome with our Democratic Party. So, and then it's like, okay, well, we're going to lose. We're going to alienate those types of voters, right? And it's a stupid strategy, but I think it's something that we need to learn from. But you telling me this I think it's really good, because that's something that we have to do better on. We have to be the big tent party, but we can't just say you've got to be so progressive, or we don't want you, or we're just going to act like you're not really welcome, right? I mean, you're kind of welcome, but you're not, like you said, we have room on our campaign for you. Well, that's not a very good pitch. Our pitch should be, we would love to have you a part of our campaign. We would love for you to join us. We would be honored for that, because we would. And so I think that's what we're trying to do too, is figure out all these problems so we can come up with the solutions, because you can't just put a Band-Aid on this stuff and say, oh, okay, well, everything's good now because Trump sucks so bad, so we're just going to coast into victory. Because no, we're not. But also, I think the Democratic Party has to figure out all this stuff, and we have to start working with these groups of people. And like you said, highlighting all these business issues, like like you said, immigration is just really hurting the workforce, because it's going to drive up prices. It's going to make things cost so much more. It's going to make labor cost so much more, and that's going to disrupt it all. And so it's like, okay, like you said, from a business perspective, along with the fact it's morally reprehensible and it's just, human rights, everything is horrible with what they're doing. But on that aspect too, it's bad.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And, and interestingly enough, it was also, so when I left the party, I then went independent for a year, just because I kind of, needed some time to, gather myself. And then, of course, by the time, when I became a Democrat in advance of 2020. So before my election, because I didn't want to start voting more in the local elections as it related, like Central Committee and those, because when you register as independent, if people didn't know that, you actually can't vote in some of those local elections. And that's really important to me to go vote. And so, but it was during that time, and even still sometimes, like, even now, people are like, we're so glad you came to the right side, or that you realized you were wrong. And it's like, so, and I have a few responses to that. I'm like, well, one, all of us should always be evolving our perspective. It's actually the first sign of emotional intelligence, is that, hey, if you give me more data about something, I'm absolutely willing to change my, thoughts, ideologies, whichever. Great, give me some facts and data that I may not have been exposed to before. But also, it's like, okay, but then some people, I'm like, so you're assuming your way is the only the right way, and some of these folks are actually very, very extreme. I would say even off the spectrum of extreme in the Democratic Party, and where I'm like, that's actually a turnoff. I'm like, well, good thing I know plenty of middle of the road folks who are also Democrats as well, who identify as the pro-human rights side, plus the pro-business, pro-bank account side. In that sense, right? We can have it all. We've just been told by politicians and billionaires that we can't, but we all can, actually. What a concept, but it's true. But nonetheless, I felt like over those years, I'm like, oh, it's so interesting. So I would say, if anything, with the Democratic Party, is to say, hey, yes, we should be that big tent, but also mean it, and showcase that, to say, as exactly as we've had, conversations here where, yeah, I'm sure we don't agree on every single issue the exact same way, but we can have that middle ground of like, hey, we're pro human rights and we don't want
Yes.
people being on the streets. Like we want people to
Yes.
actually have money too, to go do whatever they want.
Yeah.
And so I think, if we can stick to that versus just such extreme, because each side can be incredibly polarizing and
Sure.
extreme. So I think
Sure.
whoever's going to win is going to be able to kind of come back to the middle a bit,
Yeah.
of just, with some of that versus just to your point, like the alienation. But like I said, I think in this highly polarized environment, we aren't going to get the extreme MAGA folks. Like that's why I would not waste time with those folks, frankly. But I would, of course, I'm always open to hear people's thoughts. But regardless, for this election, it's finding those centrists and the Republicans who are fed up with the way the Republican Party is going, where they just haven't changed their affiliation yet, and they're open and they want to hear fresh ideas. They want to know, what is the Democratic Party going to offer me besides just bashing Trump?
Sure.
Because to your point, if all we run on is Trump sucks, well, that's not necessarily going to win either. We need to have functioning policy.
No, not at all. And in 2020, one of the key points that I saw looking at the data was you basically had, it was like 4%. It was like 4 or 5 or 6% of Trump voters switched to Biden. So they had voted for Trump in 2016, and then they switched to Biden because of some of the policies we're talking about. It wasn't because we turned out more voters or anything, but that was really one of the big factors that decided the election. I mean, there was a lot of factors. And so that's one of the things. And then, in 2016, we lost for a lot of reasons and everything. So those key, those little things like that with those groups of voters where an election might be decided by less than 10,000 votes might make the difference in the election. So it's like, yes, Democratic Party, we have to be able to do that. We can't just say, you've got to be, you've got to agree with me on every little thing, or, get away from me. Don't talk to me. And and I've seen people do that. I've seen literally our side do that, and it drives me insane. And I'll sit there and argue with the people and everything. I got in a big argument with a lady who said Obama never really did anything to help groups, and I'm like, what are you talking about? He passed Obamacare. Like, I mean, it was, there's 20 million people who have healthcare now, but I mean, it's just like, it was an example, right? I mean, it was because he didn't pass single payer, right? Medicare for all. And so, but it's like, okay, but he didn't have a choice because Congress wouldn't pass that. They would only, and he barely got him to pass Obamacare. But Obamacare is really, really good, And so, So that's.
And I would, I mean, I think there also is an education issue where sometimes people just think, oh, the president can do certain stuff, like to your point of then they didn't even realize, like, oh, Congress was actually in charge of that, which is why he wasn't able to get some of that done.
Yes.
Which is what we're right now. We have a Congress that's basically vacant, with the majority being the Republicans, in right now. So they're just granting everything left and right, and even a compromised Supreme Court. So that's not doing any good. But typically when those checks and balances are there, that does make it harder for presidents to be executing on their platform and certain issues as well. So I also do think that the Democratic Party needs to just get clearer on messaging, because I feel like there's still, it's, even with like
we have so many
Steyer,
messages.
and even for like Steyer, running for California's governor, my goodness, with him spending over $200 million, like he could have been helping the state of California in so many ways versus just trying to buy the election, or when he tried to buy the presidential election. Like, what do people actually stand for? Like, what is the Democratic Party? And I'm not asking like you for like us to solve that. I'm saying, like, as they think about these next few years, like, what does that look like? Like an actual talk track that can be given out to all of these politicians, so they are speaking the same language, and even all of us as activists, so we know what to be saying, versus this kind of disjointed messaging, versus like, just trying to say things here or there. It's almost like they're taking a reactive role versus proactive of just waiting for the Republicans to do something versus us actually standing up against it or starting it and being proactive. So I do think there is a messaging problem that needs to be reworked. And so I think whether Kamala, decides to run again, which that would be very exciting if she does, or whoever, runs for the presidential primary, even if it's Gavin Newsom, whoever, a myriad of potential folks here that we could talk about for hours. But with any of those folks, I would just advise them to just get clear on your messaging. Of course, the bashing on Trump, that naturally happens anyway from people. So it's more so, and I would say, especially, just based on folks I know who are the kind of middle of the road Republicans, they truly want to know, like, great, what is the policy? Like, how can this help me?
Yes.
Like, people I love, like, if people have families, their children, whatever, like, people just want to know, how can it help them with relief, whether that's for them to have access to healthcare in an affordable way, education, food. They're not going to go lose their house if they, kind of thing. Like, it's gas prices, or do they have to sacrifice, gas for a week to have food on the table?
Business, small business loans. I mean, there's so many different things. Pell Grants, SNAP, providing food and everything. A lot of Democrats are for making community college free, but also student loan forgiveness, which Trump basically wants to get rid of all that. And so, it's night and day difference. But like you said, messaging has to be so much better. And we've talked about that literally on every episode. And that's one of the biggest knocks that people say is the Democratic Party. Our message just sucks because you can't just say broad, oh, healthcare, education, jobs. Yes, we can. We're good. For us, it's like, well, shit, that didn't work very good. You know what I mean? But that's what we do. I mean, I've been on the campaign trail, and that's basically what we're doing. And it's like we have to be so much better. But I'm glad you brought that point, because that's something that voters are going to want to know. How is this going to improve my lives? Because otherwise, they're not going to vote for us. And we saw that in 2024. They did not get out to vote for us. And this is an interesting stat I saw. 15% of Biden voters in 2020 did not vote for Kamala in 2024. Okay.
Wow.
And so that was a huge difference in the election. So if you look at that, those are Democratic voters who basically said, okay, I'm either going to vote for Trump or I'm going to stay home. And a big chunk of those people staying home is why we're going to lose. It's why we lost in 2016. And, one of the reasons. And so messaging, we have to be able to say, like you said, whoever the candidate is, and as activists, we've got to be able to say, like, a lot of that stuff you just said. Okay, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and have all these things ready. No, definitely.
Exactly.
Okay.
Versus just and a lot of them like to just say, hey, we're open to everybody. It's like, okay, like, let's, bring that down to realistic language, as well, where it's like, I mean, and ideally I would hope that the Democratic Party actually evolves into that. Cause I feel like even prior to my time, or as I've tried to, talk to folks on different sides of the aisle from like historical perspectives, like at one point, like Republicans were more actually of that. And it's, throughout history, I feel like it's kind of been, teeter-tottered here and there, where I feel like Democrats are in a prime time right now to dominate and take control because, some of us actually care about human rights. Like we prioritize those. Like even though I've had my business career, like I'll take human rights any day over a bank account in that sense. So, and advocating for the people. And I know there's a lot of people out there like that too. And so I think when we're saying that messaging too, it's like, okay, well then great. Let's not have just extremists, alienate people who do want to come over to the Democratic Party, even if they are more, middle of the road, if you will, with certain issues. Like you said, it doesn't mean everything is a cookie cutter. Oh, you must be everything to be this fit, because actually neither party works then, if that's the case, as is, if you have to be exactly, to that. And so I, happy to, be part of the conversation, continue to, advocate and see how we can get to that really refined messaging, especially for some of these presidential, folks we have coming up. Here, I think with those candidates, it's going to be imperative for them to get their messaging right, because as we know on social media, things can become swayed within seconds. Something can be trending if somebody says one word wrong or this or that. And so I also just think enabling the base on more with us to give us proper talking points.
Oh, totally.
And then you start seeing a collective message that people will actually understand and can get behind.
Yeah, and the difference too between our side and their side's going to vote regardless. I mean,
exactly.
We have to get out here and bring in all these issues and inspire all these people, but also message all the stuff and everything, because if we don't, they'll just stay home. And we've seen that election cycle after election cycle. And but the right in the MAGA base and everything, they could care less about any of it. They're going to vote, and so we have to be able to, counter that. So yes, very, very good point. So last question, what motivates you as an activist?
I would say the people. I mean,
Yeah.
frankly, I think, just given my different experiences and
Yeah.
people who are, were in my life that I love, like since I am an ally to the, LGBTQI plus community and
Yeah.
to all these marginalized groups, I mean, it as an empath, like it just pains me to see how hurtful Trump and his people, his cult can
Yeah.
be. And I think, and it then does beg the question, like, wow, is this really who and what America is?
Yeah.
Since we never actually really did tamper down the Confederates, after we
Yeah.
won. And so I think I always like to tell them, like, oh, it could be really interesting to see if Lincoln actually would not have been assassinated, how would things have been different today, potentially. And so regardless, I think, when I see so many people suffering in the world, I have a hard time with that, and with people who, maybe quote quote voiceless, feel like they can't do anything. And so I, feel fortunate, I guess, enough to be able to
Yeah.
have a platform and to speak up and to speak out and to help any way I can and really mobilize my communities that I'm, part of, from a very, authentic, realistic way. Like, let's just
Yeah.
stop the human suffering and hate,
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
someone who people don't even know. And also, like, let's stop stealing from people of, their hard-earned money and give them the opportunities to have a nice life rather than
Yeah.
keeping them down so only the 1% can excel. Like, everybody should be able to live a life of dignity and however they want, because I also know
Yeah.
that, hey, everybody's American dream may look different. It's kind of the same with people's politics. Like, the American
Yes.
dream doesn't have to just be this one blanketed statement. I think that looks and means something different to every single person based on their life priorities and what they want and or need. And
Yes.
so I think, really, as I view myself, my continued activist journey is to really be able to help share that with folks and help shatter some of those glass ceilings and break down
Yeah.
those barriers, so more people can actually have a life they deserve and want.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, you got me inspired just by talking about that. And and hopefully we'll have lots of more opportunities to do this work together. And hopefully we'll have
Yes.
lots more conversations and everything, because I think this was a phenomenal conversation. And I think it is going to impact a lot of people. And I think a lot of the people who hear it will be more driven to get out there and do the work. And that's what it's going to require. And that's what our goal is with this podcast, is to basically, okay, there's so many ways you can help, but there's so many people you can connect with to do all this work, and how much of an impact it does have on people's lives and how much it is needed. And we are the people. And, so this is, phenomenal episode. Okay. Do you want to plug your organization real quick, or your consulting group?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. You're editing some of this out, right? Or some of these breaks?
No, I'm not. Yeah.
Right now, like, this won't be.
Yeah. You want to talk about your consulting group real quick?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay.
So my organization that I now have of my firm is called Expressions Consulting. So I specifically focus on go-to-market advisory / execution for nonprofits, corporations, startups, of really their overarching needs. So whether that's related to strategic partnerships, of either like identifying or helping nurture and manage those for them, to storytelling. So whether it's, creating those narratives for individuals and or the organizations, or let's say like big announcements, to even like social media, events, content / even communications, public relations strategies, integrated marketing and communication strategies. And then also, helping advise folks on even, best marketing practices, and also being a thought leader. So there's a whole host of ways that folks can connect with me, and you can find me on Google at Expressions Consulting, or you can also find me on LinkedIn as well.
Terrific. Well, thank you so much. And it's been fantastic. And let me go to this really quick. All righty. And thank you for joining this episode of Change to the People. We really would love for you to join the fight with us. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram, and TikTok. We do need your help. We will be engaging people in their communities, and there's so much work to do out there. You can just join us at events. You can help on social media, and we'll have more ways to help at changeforthepeople.com. We are a 501c4 nonprofit, and we'd love to have your support. You can donate at changeforthepeople.com, and we will see you next time. Thank you so much, and it's great to have been speaking with you.
Thank you.